Have you seen that movie before? It's called Pleasantville. It was made in 1998, and it stars Tobey Maguire and Jeff Daniels and Reese Witherspoon. I couldn't think of her name, who plays this sweet girl who's not quite so sweet and not quite as innocent as you might think. And Pleasantville is a television show. It's sort of like the fictional version of Leave It to Beaver, where everything is perfect. And as you could see from that clip, everything is perfect. You can't miss a basket in Pleasantville, at least if you're from Pleasantville. Everything has square corners. They get up in the morning, and their mother, who looks a lot like June Cleaver, has these piles of waffles and eggs and bacon, and they're used to not eating anything at all for breakfast, and she's making sure that they have a good, healthy start to their morning, and it's just piled high. And I showed you that because of another video that I couldn't show you today. This idea that the world could possibly be perfect. And by the way, someday I will do a sermon on Pleasantville. I just wanted to show you that clip because it is just so deeply theological and so deeply rooted in who we are as a people and what's wrong with us as a people. But I wanted to show you another clip, but I couldn't because the video clip is so bad. I ran across it again here in the last few weeks. It's a digital copy of a VHS copy, the old VHS tapes of some Super 8 movies, the little films like that got transferred onto the VHS, and I've now finally digitalized it. And I call it Luther's Home Movies, and not like Martin Luther, but like my dad's cousin Luther. Because when we were growing up, he had one of these little Super 8 movie cameras, and he took videos. He took movies. They weren't videos. He took movies of all of our family gatherings, and especially of Christmas Eve. And I found this thing recently, and it just so took me back. I remember those Christmas Eves. For me, it didn't start on Christmas Eve night. It started earlier in the afternoon when we would get a phone call from my Aunt Leva, who sent Dad and I down to the Greyhound bus station. Because our other aunt, Petra, who lived in North Dakota, and her husband was a pastor, so she could not go away on Christmas Eve, helped Leva with the baking. And so, can't make this stuff up, folks. She took lefse and kringle and rummebrød and anything else that she put together, and she did half the baking for Leva, and she put it in boxes and put it on the Greyhound bus. Okay? And then it traveled from Fargo, North Dakota to Sioux City, Iowa, where Dad and I went to the Greyhound station to pick up Christmas Eve goodies, take it to Leva's house, and she'd already started setting things out. So then we go home to our little family deal. There were 5 of us total with my brother and my mom and dad and my grandma, and we would have a little Christmas Eve dinner and a little gift opening of our own, and then we went to back to Leva's house for the evening. And there were like 600 people packed in this little house. Not quite that many, but it felt that way, And they were all there, every one of them. Leva we're in and out of the kitchen, making sure all the trays are filled. The trays packed this high with lefse, and another tray with rummebrød, and it was just heaped with this sugar goodness. And then there's Uncle Al, who was sitting in an easy chair next to the Christmas tree, and he's passing out $1 bills to all the kids. And beside him, his Uncle Tom, who was normally very stoic. He was sort of a city founder or a city father back in the day. And so he always had kind of a straight face to himself, but not on Christmas Eve. He and Al were cutting up. There's a picture of them in the video where he's got a baby bottle. He's pretending like he's sucking on. And this is like one of the city fathers of Sioux City. And then Alice starts playing the piano, and they get in a line, and they start singing Christmas carols to each other. We started singing Christmas carols to each other, and our cousins had come from Kansas City, and it was just, and I watched this video and again, it just made me so sad. And I love my life right now. It just couldn't be better. And you folks are a part of that. I love my family. I love my spouse. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. But what I wouldn't give to go back there, to head on down to the Greyhound station that probably isn't there anymore and pick up the cookies and walk in that house with all those people, to be in that house and to be a child again and take a dollar bill and say thank you to Uncle Al and listen to them and talk to them. What I wouldn't give for them to meet my wife, my children, my grandchildren. But you know, it's kind of a Pleasantville moment, isn't it? It's not there anymore. It doesn't exist. I tell you that story because I'm guessing that all of you have similar kinds of stories. That there are pieces of your life that, and it's probably good right now, just like me. It's maybe good right now, but there are pieces of your life that are missing, and that's just the nature of things. And what you wouldn't give to spend an evening with your spouse who is gone. And what you wouldn't give to have grandma there or grandpa there and introduce them to your grandkids, your children. Let them sit on his lap and get to know him the way you did. I mean, and you know, this is the time of the year. It's always that way for us, right? It's always a little bit of sadness and a little bit of joy, but especially this time of year, because Christmas is that time when we spend it with families, and the memories are just visceral. And we miss those people now more than we do in other times of the year. And you know, the thing is that this life that we have, it's not completely ours. We're never quite always at home. Because no matter where you are in life, there are pieces that are missing. Except maybe in childhood, because you don't know that the pieces are missing until you get there, right? Maybe that's why we long for childhood so much. I don't know. I think about that, and I think about the times when I was there and that with the family. But I also know in the back of my mind, it meant nothing to me at the time because I didn't know them, that my grandfather wasn't there. Never knew my grandfather. My great-grandmother, great-grandfather, they weren't there. They were gone long before I was. But I'm certain that for Leva and for Al and for Tom and for Carl and for all of them, that there was a little sadness and a little happiness in those times for them as well because of the people that weren't there for them. And that's the way it is for us. The life that we have, we're on a journey, and we're never completely at home. And so we long for things that just don't exist anymore. And we make the best of it. We try to create these perfect Christmases, and we smile, and it's fun. But there's also a little sadness with that, hiding behind the smiles. Let's sing. So you heard that lesson that, was it Larry that read it? Is that who read it? Yeah, Larry read the lesson. You heard the lesson. It's from Isaiah chapter 40, and it's a really interesting lesson, not only because of what it says, but because of who it's written for and who it's written to. Isaiah 40 is kind of a transition point in the book of Isaiah. Before this time, the first 39 chapters, Isaiah is really talking about some nasty things, and he's passing judgment on the people because they have come to a place that's not a very good place. They lost their homes. They lived in a country called Israel. They had this shining city called Jerusalem. And 40 years before Isaiah chapter 40 comes along, they lost it all. They had a kingdom. They were a powerful country. They could not be beaten. It was glory years and a golden age for them. And about 40 years before this was written, the Babylonian army comes and they take people away from their homes. The Israelites are defeated. God's people are defeated. They're taken from their homes. The king is put in prison. And they are forced to walk hundreds of miles to Babylon, where the army distributes them in small groups all around the Babylonian countryside. They do that so that there's not too many of them in one place and they can kind of control them. If you get too many rebellers in one place, they can create a disturbance. And so they're scattered across the Babylonian countryside. They can't even be a people together anymore. And then 40 years later, there's a ray of hope. Because Babylon is defeated by Persia. And the king of Persia, Cyrus, there's word that he might just let the Israelites go back home. And so all of a sudden, they dare to think about something they haven't thought about in 40 years because they have lived in this world of night and darkness for 40 years. And they're thinking about that shining city once again. They're thinking about that kingdom once again. They're thinking about being a strong country once again. And it's in the midst of that hope that Isaiah writes the words that Larry just read to you. And I wish, Larry, I would have had you start a little bit earlier because it talks about the rough places being planed and the mountains being smoothed over. It talks about an easy journey back to Jerusalem. But before that, his very first words, he says, "Comfort, comfort." And they are words for the time of darkness because they're not future tense. They're present. They're right now. They are words for the time of darkness. In the midst of the darkness, I am here, God says. Comfort. Comfort my people. And as they take the journey back, comfort. Comfort. And here's the kicker. When they come over the hill and see Jerusalem for the first time, comfort, comfort. Because God knows that what they're remembering is a worn-out Super 8 movie that's just got all these shadows set to classical music. It's Pleasantville. That's what they remember. Because when they come over that hill, what they're going to find is not one stone on top of another. The place is a pile of rubble. And they're going to have to start over from scratch. The only thing that's happened is in 40 years is that it is overgrown with brush and overtaken by the rats. And the few people who were left behind either didn't have the resources or the will to do anything to change it. And in the midst of that, God says, comfort, comfort. See, they've been living in darkness. They have this moment of hope. But then they're moving into something that's going to be another kind of darkness once again. And God doesn't fill them with empty promises. And he doesn't fill them with false hopes. He just says, wherever you are, right here, right now, comfort my people. Comfort. Comfort. Now, you may want to ask, why does there have to be this night in our lives? Why can't God just change things and turn everything into an eternal day? And the short answer to that is, I don't know. But I do know this, that in our lives, there is daylight and there is darkness. There is hope, there is despair, There are good times and there are bad times. And God is there through all of it. Anything less is just pretending that those realities do not exist. And you know, when it comes to daylight versus darkness, I don't know if you know this or not, but you can see way more in the dark than you can during the day. I mean, walk outside this morning. Look up in the sky. What are you going to see? You're going to see a blue dome. And you're going to see the world around you. And it all looks big and large and important until the twilight comes and the sun sets and the universe explodes into a sea of stars. And what you thought was so big and so important, or maybe so down and so depressing, is enveloped in something way larger than you could ever imagine. If you never knew anything of the night, all you would know is that this is it. But in the night, we see things that are so large and so awesome. And they are so big that they make everything else in our worlds so manageable, so small. It's being part of something larger than yourself. The same is true with our spiritual lives. We have day and we have night. And the day is great, but the night comes. And there's trial, and there's trouble, and there's difficulty. But thank God the night comes, because in it, we are enveloped in the endless expanse of His grace and His mercy and His everlasting love that takes whatever troubles and trials you carry and He holds them in the palm of His hand, holds you in the palm of His hands. Comfort. Comfort, my people. Comfort. Let's sing. Well, there's one small part of Christmas Eve at Leva's house that I did not tell you about. Every Christmas Eve, the entire room would stop. And one of the children was handed a family Bible. And we opened to Luke chapter 2. And we read to the entire group that was assembled. It's a story about a God who leaves His home and enters into a place where there is no room for Him. And He makes you His friend, and He envelops you in that endless sea of stars called the love of God. And that story was there when I was a boy, surrounded with all those family members who are now long gone. And that story was there when I went to college and I met my wife. And that story was there when I started my first parish in Lake Preston, and then into Chicago and Storm Lake, Fort Dodge. It was there as our children were born and as our grandchildren were born. It was there in those parishes with those people who I now consider part of my extended family. That story will be there next week again, when we introduce these traditions to the two newest members of our family. And we, as a parish, gather together here in this room and join in to share that story of God's eternal love with each other. And that story will be there every year for as long as you and I are here on this earth. And then when we are gone, the story will carry us to the other side, where we will see all of those people who are now just pieces that are missing out of our lives right now. And we'll be gathered together in a great big room, eating and drinking and singing and sharing in the love of Jesus. And the Lamb will be at the center of the table, and he will make all things new. Amen.